You are in the Temple of the Rants, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one is for Plant Lawyer, who says, rant about theme parks slash tourist traps. So I live in Virginia Beach, which is a tourist trap city. It is called the Resort City by some. I don't know why, because that's ridiculous. But we do have the longest pleasure beach in the world. And we also have the one of the biggest theme parks on the East Coast, one of the biggest in the country, Busch Gardens, which is only 45 minutes away. So, Busch Gardens for me growing up, it's first of all, I do think it's an amazing theme park because it's basically themed around Europe. Each section of the park is another country in Europe that has its own like design sense and references to all the generic cultural artifacts of that particular country. It's all designed to be kind of medievally and but not like generically so. It's pretty interesting, and I think it's a cool place to just walk around and look at. But in terms of what you do at a theme park, like all anybody goes for is the roller coasters. That's all anyone gives a fuck about. If you go to Busch Gardens with a group, they're all going to be rushing to the roller coasters. And personally, I don't really have the stomach for roller coasters. I don't find it fun to be made dizzy and sick. I get my stomach churns very easily. Every drop, every turn makes me feel sick. And it's not even about how scary it is. Like when I was younger, it definitely was fucking terrifying. But like as an adult, it's less a matter of being afraid and more a matter of just being in pain. Just having my stomach doing fucking tumbler dryer shit and like walking off and just being dizzy and, out of breath and needing to fucking sit down. And I just don't get much out of it. Like I'm not much of a thrill seeker, I guess. So, when I used to go to Busch Gardens with my family, basically they'd all get on the roller coasters and I would sit around and wait. And like the thing is that the lines for roller coasters at theme parks, if you're going on a day when the park is busy, which is most of the time, they're long as shit. You're waiting in like a 45-minute to 2-hour line for a ride that lasts like 15 to 30 seconds, maybe a minute on one of the bigger ones. I just can't, that return on investment, I don't find it that memorable, to like ride a roller. Well, I guess I can remember the roller coasters I've been on, so maybe I won't say it's not that memorable. But, like, I don't remember it as necessarily a pleasant experience. It's just like, well, I waited in 2 hours so I could fucking feel like shit for 15 minutes. They used to have this one coaster called the Big Bad Wolf that was, like, the baby mode one. Like, it was still a fun roller coaster, but it just didn't have any fucking insane shit. Like, all the other ones are crazy. Like, you got the fucking one that just drops you, like, 210 feet. The one where fucking you're doing loops while your legs are dangling down from it, and then the one that's just corkscrews over a lake nonstop. Like, shit's painful, man. It's not fun. Big Bad Wolf was fun, but they took it out because not enough people gave a shit because it wasn't a huge draw because it wasn't a dangerous fucking nightmare coaster. Fucking Fabio got hit in the face by a duck riding on one of those. You know that? Fun fact. I think that was at Busch Gardens. Anyway, I don't know if anybody knows who Fabio is. I only know him because of that anecdote. Famous before my time. But anyway, fucking, the park is fun to explore in general and look at, but doing anything is extremely expensive. Like, it's one thing to ride the coasters and rides, but like, if you go into any of the random gift shops or you want to eat at one of the little restaurants or anything, they're all pretty expensive. And my family's always been cheap as fuck. Like, we generally wouldn't, go to any of that stuff. We weren't like trying to spend money. Like, they were already like, oh, we spent all this money getting in. Like, all this stuff is too expensive. It's not worth the money, Like, my mom has always had a mentality of like, and I have this mentality as well until recently. I've been trying to break it, which is like, to not buy something on the basis of its worth. Like, if you see a plushie in Busch Gardens and it costs $12 and you're like, that plushie should, by all rights, only cost $6. I could buy an equivalent plushie elsewhere for $6. I'm not buying that plushie. That's the mentality of like my mom and myself. However, as I've grown older, I've come to appreciate how most of that stuff is meant to really commemorate an experience. It's not so much about the object, it's about where you got the object, remembering the event in itself. And that is what you're paying for. You're paying for commemoration of this day, of being able to look back on it and keep that memory alive, because your memories slip away over time, and like having something to jog your memory will allow you to rekindle that experience and remember the fun times that you've had throughout your life. And I never valued that stuff because I've always had an amazing memory. Like, I've always been able to remember fucking basically anything, but like, I finally gotten to the age where some of my early years are starting to disappear slowly. Like, I would say my memories from up through like age 10 are getting a little hazy. So like, when I see something that is commemorative, like, I have thankfully lots of things from my past that I created, like any papers I wrote or anything like that, or I can remember any piece of media I consumed for sure, but like, it definitely helps to witness something that re-sparks that memory. So like, do I think that the stuff at these places is overpriced? Yes, but you're paying for the experience to have as much fun as possible, because that money is worth less in other contexts. And you might be thinking about it like, the way I thought as a kid is always like, I wanted to buy things because then I have the thing forever. Like, I was always somebody who favored owning objects over, spending money on temporary experiences. So like, for a long time, I didn't used to go out to eat at any kind of expensive, like, by expensive I mean more than $5 restaurants, because I was like, oh, why spend money on food when I can save that money to spend on DVDs? Well, now I have this gigantic wall of DVDs that spark no particular memory. I mean, like, I remember the show being good, but now that I have digital media, I don't need the DVDs to watch the show. The DVDs don't, they don't give me anything the show didn't give me already, and the memory of getting it is non-existent because I just bought it at a store. Whereas, like, if I spend... like, we recently went to this strawberry festival that they hold in the south end of Virginia Beach, I guess, every year. I'd never heard of it, but apparently it's kind of a big deal. It's just like a big fair, and there's all these food stands, and there's a little carnival, and like, it's all stuff that I would never have spent money on before, but this time I did, because I wanted to have a memorable time at this place, to take something home with me, to be able to remember all the things I ate, all the things I saw, all the, rides that I rode. I rode my first Ferris wheel. It was a real fast Ferris wheel. It was pretty funny. Like, it lasted a while, but it just moved really fast and was creaky. But, I gotta cling to that memory. And now I've got this gigantic strawberry cup with a big fucking strawberry on the top that looks ridiculous, that I can remember the experience by. And, that was worth it. So, theme parks, they're definitely overpriced bullshit, but, you at least get an experience that you can look back on fondly if you had a good time. As for tourist traps, I don't feel as strongly about those, because they are the same theory. It's the same theory of like, oh, you're in a cool place, buy some things to remember it by, but they tend to just be janky bullshit that makes you realize that you shouldn't have gone to that place. So like Virginia Beach, for instance. As somebody who lives here, I can go down to the beach anytime. The beach is cool in as far as it's a big, huge beach with a really nice boardwalk, and it's fun to go up and down the boardwalk, but the like actual experience of like the places that are on the beach, it's basically a bunch of overpriced hotels and overpriced restaurants and overpriced gift shops that all sell the same shit. So if you buy something from one of these places, all you're commemorating is the experience of going to the beach, I guess. Like, there's nothing there to experience that is so fun as to justify the cost of the items that they sell there. I think of like Salem Salem's probably the worst tourist trap I've been to. It was a fun time, ultimately, I guess. Like, I guess I can say that I got the memory of it, but, like, the everything there is just a retread of the same exact thing, because the story of Salem is not interesting at all, and is very easy to tell, and, like, there's not a ton of, like, cool remnants of it. It's just like a regular city. Like, Salem is just a modern city built on top of a place where something kind of dramatic happened once, and I think there was maybe a time when the understanding of the story was different from what it is now, but, like, the whole town is, like, themed around witches and witchcraft, and there's all this witch paraphernalia, even though the actual story had nothing to do with witches in any farther than just that was the excuse people used to kill each other, was that they accused each other of witchcraft. But it wasn't like an identity thing. It wasn't like there were these Wiccan people who were being othered for their weird beliefs. It was just like a bunch of people spreading rumors about each other over land disputes. Like, it had nothing to do with what the city itself pitches itself as like, oh, this is witch haven, all you Wiccans and witches come here and get your witch memorabilia and celebrate witch pride, and, like, oh, this is like an identity thing, and it's like, that's not what the story's about. So, like, it's basically a self-serving tourist trap that has no real basis in anything real. And, like, you can kind of enjoy the history of the city, but, like, there's just not, it's mostly just a place to spend a lot of money and get told the same story 1,000 times and see a bunch of unrelated witch memorabilia. Virginia Beach, the boardwalk, is like, it's just a bunch of generic gift shops selling the same t-shirts, and for some reason swords. Like, all these places have katanas. Why the fuck are you buying a katana at Virginia Beach? I don't understand. We have nothing to do with fucking Japanese culture here. I don't understand the katanas. So, like, yeah, that kind of tourist trap just kind of baffles me. It's like, it feels like it's meant to prey on stupid people. Like, people who think that they have done something exceptional, and therefore they're trying to buy memorabilia for it, but what they have done is not particularly exciting, and there are much cooler things you could have done. At least a theme park has rides and has, like, some kind of, maybe, some kind of, like, memorable thing to do at it, or even just a cult. Like, going to the Strawberry Festival, it was mostly just like, hey, this is something that is organized by my town, and the people who live here are running the stalls. It's like a community kind of thing, like, that's more interesting to me than, like, going to some place that you're not from, that's not that interesting, and then buying overpriced crap to say that you went somewhere, I don't know. I guess the memory is still worth it, even if it's even if it's not the most exciting place, like Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts, which is just a pretty regular sized boulder with, like, a little inscription on it that says landed at this time, and then, like, there's nothing else there, so the town, like, it's, like, not even an effective tourist trap because there's just not enough to go on. Pretty funny place. You could buy a little magnet of the rock and be able to say, well, I went there and it was lame, and that's still a fun memory, I suppose. But, yeah, I don't know. That kind of shit really cracks me up. I guess it's the kind of thing, I mean, they call it a tourist trap for a reason, because you go there, and then you're like, oh shit, I have fallen into a trap, Take it as a learning experience. Research the places you go before you go, and make sure they're actually interesting.